This podcast may contain paid advertisements, but more on that later. Welcome to the O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast, your go-to resource for unraveling the intricacies of business and leadership, honing in on the essence of bootstrapping a business from scratch. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur, a dedicated bootstrapper, or a leader navigating life's various challenges, this podcast is crafted just for you. I'm Isaiah O'Connor, your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, and my mission is to guide you towards personal and professional growth. Let's embark on this journey together. Welcome back, and today we're going to go ahead and continue on with our discussion about wages and compensation. Now, in the last episode, I talked about living wage, or last 3 episodes as it turned out to be. I talked about what a living wage is, and one of the things I talked about is in these conversations about wages, the full compensation package is not usually taken into consideration. So what is compensation? Let's talk about that first. Compensation is the entire package of salary, wages, benefits, bonuses, and other financial and non-financial rewards that employer provides to an employee in exchange for his work and or services. That's pretty straightforward. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can compensate your employee. So let's go through a few of these. Now, I'm going to break this up into 2 lists. Today, I'm going to do kind of 3 little sections here. First section, total list of all compensation. Second section, what applies most to small business owners and entrepreneurs. And lastly, I'm going to explain how I compensated my employees. So let's get into this. First of all, you have direct financial compensation. And that's pretty straightforward. This is, they work, they get money. That's direct financial compensation. So, for example, your standard wages, your hourly rate, for example, your salary rate. You've got your overtime, which is, again, pretty standard, straightforward. You work past a certain time, you get more money. Great. Then you have something called piece rate. Now, this is not as common, and not everyone has heard of this. But piece rate is when you pay an employee per something they do. This is most common in, for example, the construction industry, where a roofer might get paid, say, $25 per square yard of roofing he puts on, just for an example. Or what I did one time was I did tree planting, and I was paid per tree I planted. I can't remember what it was now, but it was something like 25 cents per every tree you planted. So if you planted a whole lot of trees in an hour, you'd make good money. If not, not so good. But it encourages an employee to work efficiently and well. So that's piecework. Then, of course, you have bonuses, which can be a sign-on bonus. It can be a retention bonus. It could be bonus because you meet a goal as a company, a sales goal, a growth goal, some sort of goal that you do with your employees so they can reach a bonus. You can also set something called a profit sharing, which is also considered bonus, but a little bit different. A profit sharing bonus is when at the end of a quarter, at the end of a year, you take your profits and you share it amongst all your employees, which is, in my opinion, something amazing to do for your employees. So yeah, that's definitely a thing. And of course, let's not forget commissions. Usually in sales jobs where everything you sell, you get a portion of that sell as a commission. You can also have instant commission things. When I worked at Radio Shack, we had something called a SPIF, which is a Sales Incentive Performance Fund, if I remember correctly. And other companies use the SPIF as well. And that is an instant bonus on something you sell. For example, when I worked at Radio Shack, if you sold a phone with a basic plan, you get $5. With a more advanced plan, you get $10. With a family plan, you get $25. right off the top on your paycheck immediately. So that was extra on top of any commission you made, on top of the salary you're making. So that was really fun to get those spiffs, really encourage sales. So that's another thing you can do. And of course, you have the big business thing of stock options or equity in the business. And that gets to complex territory, which I can get into, but not today. That's for another episode, perhaps. And then that kind of sums up your overall broad what direct financial compensation is. Let's look into indirect financial compensation. Retirement plans. That's financial compensation. 401k, a company match, anything like that. That is a pension. Those are indirect financial compensation. Then you have health insurance, where if you provide health insurance for employees, again, that helps them out financially, but not directly. You don't give them money, you give them something of value. And that includes, of course, life insurance, disability insurance. You can also help them with savings plans or deferred compensation, where you hold some of their money for them, and that grows, usually tax deferred until it pays. And then you can also help them with tuition reimbursement for their children, for themselves, if they want to go to school. And that's always a really nice thing to do for your employees as well. And this is, again, non-cash, directly financial compensation. And then let's jump into non-financial compensation. First, professional development. I really like this personally. That's training programs, certifications, mentorship, where you help them grow skills and develop as an individual. And this is something that they can take with them. And if you do this right, perhaps you're helping them for the rest of their lives, even if they're only with you for a couple of years. You help them, you can really help them for the rest of their lives, and I love that. As an aside, in my opinion, your employees help you, of course, and that's very important. But in the long term, I want to help my employees. They're my key focus. So taking good care of them and setting them up for life, that is amazing for me. Anyway, career growth, that goes right into the development. Set it up so that there's upward mobility within your company. Be that direct standard model. Okay, you're a salesman, now you're a manager, now you're, whatever. Supervisor, manager, whatever you want to use, a standard corporate ladder type thing, which you can. Or you can just set up so you hit this goal, you can now qualify for a higher pay. And I did this with my employees, and I'll explain that when we get to that next section. Then you have what they call your benefits, your perks, paid vacation, paid sick days, wellness programs, free meals, and little extras like transit help. Maybe your employee needs to get to work every day, doesn't have a car. You buy him a bus card or something like that. And then you have personal support, where you can do child care assistance, elder care assistance, maybe have some way to help with legal needs, family-focused aid, lots of other things you can do to help out. Now, all of these that I've just talked about are more or less available to everyone. However, some of these, like the stock options, if you're an entrepreneur and you're just a bootstrapper like myself with only 1 or 2 employees, stock options are not going to be a thing. So that's fine. Let's go ahead and jump in and look at what else can we do as small business owners to compensate our people. So we're going to start with cash. This is the easiest compensation. When you're an employer, you can budget into your pricing money to pay your employees, because that goes into your pricing when you're doing your when, for example, you're setting up a job cost form or costing your products, you can add in your employees' labor as part of the price that you're charging a customer. This is a lot easier to plan for, and it's the most tangible for your employees. So, yeah, you can set up your hourly rate, your salary rate, your bonuses, all that stuff. You can do that very easily. That's easy to plan for. And you don't need an accountant to set up some sort of crazy retirement fund to do that. That's pretty straightforward. Now, again, I don't believe you should have the government dictate how much money you should pay your employees. I am a firm believer that the private market does a better job. So when it comes to this, my opinion is that you should pay your employees as much as you possibly can and still make a profit. This is important. You take good care of your employees. As I mentioned last time, Chick-fil-A pays their employees more than average. You know who else does? In-N-Out Burger in California. They pay their employees well, they take good care of them, and they in turn, take good care of the company. So, yeah, cash is king, but make sure you're paying your employees well. Don't be stingy. Don't be cheap. Because, again, it's up to you to take good care of your employees, not the government. So, we talked about wages and salaries. You can start with a smaller pay, a base training wage, for example. That's always a good thing. You can move them up from a training wage. And, of course, you can do commissions. You can do profit sharing. My point is, do what you can to take good care of your employees. And then, as for some indirect financial options, what's available to you as a small business owner, well, you actually can do a retirement plan. I looked up. You can get what's called an SEP IRA, which is a simple retirement account. And it's not a lot of administration. You can start it up with $500 to start per person. And that's a pretty easy way to get started. It's not huge, and I don't know too much about it. This is just a basic research that you can start a small retirement account for your employee. It doesn't take a lot to get going. You can also find small group health insurance, around $150 a month. Now, I don't do this here in Norway because Norway has socialized healthcare, so that's not a thing that we worry about. But in the States, it's possible, and it's not too bad for your employee. And you can add in life and disability insurance. That's roughly around $20 a head. Not too much, and that's pretty basic coverage. It's something that you can do and not break the bank and really help out your employees. As an aside, my friend Jason St. Clair and host of the Athos Business Podcast, who got me started, knows insurance, and we're going to try to get together and do a collaboration podcast about insurances. So don't worry about that. We'll come back to that later. Then you can perhaps come up with a tuition reimbursement, which is you can do maybe set $300 a year or something like that to help. I did that with my own employees where I set up a way I could pay for their training. But again, I'll get back to that in a moment here. And then, of course, the easiest ones to do are the non-financial options. Professional development, hands-on training. That's something you can really do to train them. That helps. You can help them grow in their career, help them learn what to do. When I was running my balloon company, I had one employee who, when I recently shut down my company, by the way, but when business got into a lull because of COVID and then a whole bunch of other stuff that happened, even though I had to lay him off, he was able to take the skills I taught him and help that to start and open up his own business. And now he's even added in balloons as a side job to his business. So, again, this is a benefit that can last him for the rest of his life. I'm very happy about that. Then, of course, you have benefits and perks flexible paid time off, vacation days, sick time, if you can afford it, maternity leave, paid breaks where they can take a break on the clock and they get paid for it, 30 minutes, an hour. And you can do all these things that keeps your cost low, but yet really keeps people wanting to stay with you. And that's the idea. You want low turnover. You want happy employees. Happy employees take good care of their customers. Good customers are taken good care of are happy customers. Your business grows. Pretty simple. So that's the basics. And then let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and call it a break here. And after the mid-break, I will go and talk about how I took these compensation ideas and got creative with it. Welcome back to the mid-break. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone for supporting me as I get myself rolling again. Today we don't have any 5-star Apple reviews or new Patreons to shout out, but I still want to take a moment to thank all my listeners, whether you've been with me for a very long time or you're just tuning in. Your support does mean a lot to me. As a quick note, I will be no longer producing a blog to go along with the podcast. As I mentioned last year, when I tried launching a blog inside the podcast in my episode called Biting Off More Than I Can Chew, I was biting off more than I can chew. I can't keep up with doing a blog and a podcast at the same time. So I'm going to focus solely on the podcast for now. I might start to turn my notes into blog posts from time to time, but for the foreseeable future, the podcast will be my main focus. This change is also important because I've got some other things going on in my life that need my attention. I'll share more on that later. I'll also be revamping my Patreon tiers, lowering the amounts and adjusting the awards. For example, you'll have access to show notes. Lastly, I'm on the lookout for interviewees. As I've mentioned before, monologuing all the time makes me feel like a supervillain. So if you'd like to come on the show, please reach out. My contact details are in the show notes. That's all for now. Let's get back to the creative compensation now. Welcome back to part 2 of creative compensation. So, I had mentioned that I was going to talk about the way I ran my compensation plan for my employees in my business. Now, here's the thing. Not everyone's business is the same. Not everyone's revenue and business activities are the same. And that's why you need to come up with a creative plan. In my case, I did not always need a lot of extra work. I was running my own balloon entertainment and balloon decor company. Most of the time, I could handle the work by myself. But ever so often, with extra large gigs, or if I needed to do 2 gigs on the same day, or when I was doing balloon animals, it was a big enough event that it required 2 people to help get to as many kids as possible. I needed an extra hand. So I need to figure out a way to hire an employee, pay them well, and yet not need to have them work with me 100% full time. Because by the very nature of my business and the nature of my needs, I could not hire a 100% full-time person. As a matter of fact, I did get into a bit of a debate online with someone who said, if you can't afford to pay a living wage, you should not be in business. As you know from the last episode, I highly disagree with that because not everyone needs to be paid a quote-unquote living wage. Therefore, I'd narrowed my search parameters on the type of person I need to work for me. I was looking for a college student who was living at home or had other means of support who just wanted some extra money. That's what I was looking for, and that's what I got. And then I paid them as best as I could for the time they could be with me, in order to keep them happy, keep them with me, and just overall get as creative as I could with compensation, because it's really hard to come up with a really good compensation plan for an on-call employee. So my position I created was what I called an on-call permanent position. In other words, they would be on call, but the position was going to be permanent. It wasn't just a temporary. It wasn't just, I'm going to call you this time in and then cancel the contract or anything like that. Permanent position, but it was on call. So let's jump into this. First, we had a standard day, 90-day trial, and the employee could work when they were contacted, or not work when they were contacted. They had the perfect choice to choose if they wanted to work on that day or not. So if I called them and said, hey, I have a gig in 2 weeks and it's, say, 2 hours of balloon twisting or what have you, they could say, you know what, in 2 weeks' time, I'm sorry, I'm going to a friend's wedding. That doesn't work for me. And I would say, okay, no problem. And I did not hold it against them. Now, in my contract, I made it very clear that if they did not accept the work that I offered, then I was allowed to call a different employee to have them help me work. So that way they would miss out on the opportunity to make the money, but neither of us were committed. If I offered them the time, they could say no, but if they changed their mind, they could call me back, of course, but if I had already found someone else to cover the shift, then they would just not get that shift. I was trying to make it as open and flexible for both of us as possible. Then I gave a 4-week notice period for both of us. That was 4-week notice if I was going to get rid of them, and they could give me a 4-week notice if they wanted to leave. Now, in my contract, I wrote, if the employee needs, due to circumstances, such as starting a new job, they may request a shorter notice. This may or may not be approved by management. So, even with my notice, I understood that a college-age kid might get a full-time job, or might, for example, as actually happened, get married and then need a full-time job, or need to move out of the city, or a lot of different things. So I made it very flexible, even with a notice where a 4-week notice period as an official notice period was really flexible. It was just there more or less to meet the standard employment offers here where I live in Norway. 4 weeks was also because it's a little bit more specialized training to be a balloon person and be a little bit harder for me to replace. So that's why I did that. Now, as far as break policy, I did a 30-minute, here's another compensation thing, you can do a paid break. So I did a 30-minute paid break on any shift that was between 4 to 8 hours long. This is exact quote here. If there's a large job that will exceed 8 hours, a full 1 hour unpaid break will be given. On jobs that exceed 5 hours, a basic meal will be provided on the break. So let's break this down. Most of the jobs I did were 1 to 2 hours, maybe 3 hours long with help. Sometimes they were longer than that. Sometimes they were shorter. I've had one job which we built a balloon tunnel, and it took 5 or 6 hours. It was a big job. So yeah, that happens. But most of the time, it's a shorter job. It's a 1 to 2 hour gig. So if you're only going to work for 2 hours, you're not going to really need a break. But I make sure that my employees got a break, that they would get at least a half an hour of a paid break, and then if it was a really long shift, I couldn't pay them for an entire hour while they're not working, but they would get a break. And as for the lunch or the food, if it was a long day, longer than 5 hours, I would provide food. And I made it very clear to them that this did not mean they were going to get filet mignon and lobster. This was whatever I ate myself. So if it was a long day, I would pack a large lunch box with some sandwiches, some fruit, vegetables, whatever, and that would be lunch. It was what I could afford. Perhaps, as it occurred on occasion, I went out and I bought fast food, and we ate fast food. So that's was the lunch, but I provided that for us while we worked. So that was kind of a little thing I could do, where if you're going to be working for me for a long time, I'm going to pay for your food. Makes one less thing to worry about. Then I gave my job description that I had 2 different positions within my company, and I was hiring a person to do both. And the job description was a decor and production crew. So if the employee was helping me build, say, a balloon tunnel, a whole bunch of balloon columns, that sort of thing, that was one type of job. And then if they were helping me make balloon animals for kids as a balloon clown or with or without makeup, that was under the entertainer job description. Now, it wasn't quite 2 different departments, but I had different job titles for the time. Because, for example, if a person came and said, hey, I would love to be a balloon decorator, but I do not like interacting with little children, I do not want to be a balloon twister, that's fine. I could hire them as a decorator. Or if someone came and said, hey, I love working with children, I don't like this huge balloon installations, I don't want to do that, I want to just work with children, fine, you can be an entertainer, twister. Great, cool. Or you could be both, which I was trying to hire for both, and I made that clear, and it was both, and we're all good. Now, I did this also because I could pay differently depending on the type of work done. So let's jump into my compensation plan for these 2 different job descriptions. First of all, decor. I'm just going to read directly and then explain afterwards. For decor, a basic training wage will apply until the employee can perform their job duties with minimum direction. When working on a job with a team of 2 or more, the rate will be 150 kroner an hour. If working alone on a decor or other labor work, cleaning, etc., the wage will be 150 kroner an hour, or 5% of the total job price before tax, whichever is greater. For example, if the job is billed to a customer at 10,000 kroner, the employee will receive 500 kroner. When the employee has completed the basic training and can work unsupervised with minimum direction, the wage will increase to 200 an hour for labor work on a team of 2 or more, and 200 an hour or 10% of the total job price when working on the job alone. Now let me break that little section down a little bit for you. In Norway, that sounds like a lot of money, but 150 kroner an hour is around $15-ish an hour, depending on the current exchange rate. But that was a decent starting wage for an unskilled worker coming into the job market. That was pretty high for the time, for the market. A lot of times you could come in and you'd start off with 120 kroner an hour, 130 kroner an hour, maybe 140. So 150 was a good training wage. That was a temporary wage until you got fully trained. That was considered pretty good. 200 kroner an hour, again, at the time was considered pretty good, pretty decent wage. for a job where you're not having a degree in something. So that was pretty good. So I tried to make a pretty high wage in comparison with the similar positions in similar companies. I tried to pay them as high as I possibly could afford. And then, because of the nature of the on-call position and the nature of having jobs I could send them to and they could complete the job in 2 hours, for example, or less, I wanted them to have incentive to go do the job. For example, if I sent them to do a job, which I had been getting for several years, where it was 20 columns, 20 balloon columns, I was making 10,000 kroner, or $1,000 each time I did this job, every single time. With practice, you can do the job in about 2 hours. Now, the employee could have taken at the 5%, it would have been 2 hours, they would have made $300, or instead, I would pay them 10% of the job price before tax, which is 500 kroner. So they could either have made 300 kroner or 500 kroner. This incentivizes them to work well and quickly, and also gave them an incentive to go ahead and get out and go and take 2 hours out of their day to go work when they could have been doing other stuff, because now it's worth their while to go do the job. And then once they were completely trained, I was going to pay them 10% of that. So their pay was going to double for the same job. So they could have gone and done the 2-hour job, made 400 kroner, or 10%. And in this case, that would have been 10% of 10,000. They would have made 1,000 kroner instead. So I was trying to be creative and come up with an extra special way to compensate my employees, because most of their jobs would have been really, really short. Sometimes they would have only had like a half an hour or so to do the job. I could send them out and they'd take a half an hour to do the job and be done. And I wanted to feel like it was worth their time to get up and go do the job and spend that half an hour for the day. Because $7, whatever, $7.50 for half an hour is not really all that exciting to get out of bed for. But if it was a half an hour job and you could go out and you can make, say, $20, sure, great, cool. So that's why I tried to set that in there. Now, I could not do this precisely for the balloon entertainment because I took an hourly price. With the decor, I would set jobs based on a job cost form and figure out how many balloons I'd use, how much time I would use, all that good stuff. And so I could do a job cost form. Now, on the balloon entertainment, that's more of a service, not really a cost. Yes, I use balloons in the twisting, but that was such a minor cost compared to the time. That was an hourly price, flat hourly price. Now, I took a lower price to be a balloon twister, where I would be dressed nicely, but just in normal clothes and show up and make balloons. Now, if they want me to be a balloon clown, and I would put on makeup and put on a clown suit and maybe some rainbow colored hair, wig, or a big goofy clowning hat, if I did one of those, then I would charge more per hour as a balloon clown. So, when it came to my employee, I said it like this. The training rate, I started out at 175 kroner per hour, and then for the balloon twisting, and then 200 kroner per hour for the balloon clowning. And then once they passed an exam I would give them, then they would be raised up to 200 kroner an hour for balloon twisting and 250 kroner an hour for balloon clowning. Now, did you notice that? I charged more for clowning, therefore I pay my employee more for clowning. When I get paid less, I pay my employee less. When I get paid more, I pay them more. I try to pay them as best as I can and still make them very happy and take care of myself and my family as well. But if I made more money, they made more money. Pretty straightforward. Matter of fact, going into that, this whole idea of creative compensation was inspired by Dave Ramsey. I've talked to him before in the past on this podcast, and in his book on EntreLeadership, he talks about commission and how he would like to even put the secretary on commission if he could figure out a way how. Now, I don't think he can put a secretary on full-time commission. However, I did figure out a way to create a commission program for all my employees. So, it's very simple. If an employee brings me a client, no matter which job position they are in, they will receive an additional 5% commission on top of the regular pay. So if you're a secretary for me, if you're a janitor for me, and all you do is clean the office, I will still pay you 5% of any sale you bring me. If you bring me money, I will pay you some money. I'll give you a percentage. Now, maybe I can up that depending on the contract. I might make that higher at some point. I might make that a little bit lower depending on the job. But most likely I wouldn't go below 5. But at least some money for you if you bring me a client. So if you're, as Dave Ramsey said, the secretary, and you're doing letters and you're checking emails for me and you're making phone calls and answering the phones, what have you, a receptionist, and you in your private life have a friend that's having a wedding or something like that, and you tell them to come to me, and they decide to go ahead and go with me, and then they purchase something from me, I will give you some of that money. You make me money, I will give you money. I want to share this with you. In a kind of way, this was a little bit like a profit sharing bonus, but not quite. It was a bonus from the profit that I made right then, so it was a commission, but I did this because I wanted to share what money my company made with them for them bringing me money. Now, I could not afford a full-on profit-sharing bonus because I did not make that much in profit per year, and the profit I made was so low as to barely feed my family at that time when I created this contract. I needed extra help, but I didn't have that big, huge profit I could share with the employee. So that would be why. And then I also added in that if the employee uses their own vehicle to travel from the office to the job site, not from home to the office, but from the office to the job site, they would be compensated at the rate of 4 kroner per kilometer. I could not afford to pay them much, and this was in accordance with the tax law here in Norway. And then I put in, if the employee needs to travel from the office to the job site by bus, they would be provided with what's called a clip card to and from the job site. The clip card will remain at the office when not in use for all employees to use. Now, I don't know, it's been a few years since I've taken the bus in the States, but in Norway, you could buy what's called a clip. Each clip is worth 1 travel within the zone. And you could buy, say, 20 clips, and then the employee could pick up the card, use the clips, go to the job site, use a clip, go back to the office, and leave it there. So I tried to compensate them for travel on the job. And then for training. This I had to get as creative as I could because, again, I unfortunately did not have enough cash flow to spend a good hour or two doing a full-on training. And as an aside, if you hear banging noises, it's my neighbors working on their house. So hopefully you don't hear the pounding on the walls, but if you do, I can't wait for them to stop. Anyway, back to training. So all the hands-on training that occurred at my office or on the job site, I would pay them for at the training wage. Now, I could not sit there and let them practice what I taught them for hours a day and pay them for that, because I just didn't have the cash flow to do that, because my operation was really small at the time. So what do? I offered this training idea. All hands-on training that occurred would be on the office, as I said, or at the wage. I got distracted by the hammer. But then I also put on, the employee has the option of taking training materials and practice equipment home to train with. This is optional, and all training an employee does at home will not be considered paid time. Now let's break that down a little bit more. Am I telling the employees to go work at home and not pay them? No. What I'm telling them, if they want to practice on their own time so they can step up beyond the training wage into the full pay, from the 150 to 200, or from the 175 to the 250, or whatever I put. If they want to get those better, higher paid gigs, then they could go practice at home to quickly learn, so I could send them on their own. So that was a good incentive for them to learn. It was completely optional, and training equipment included balloons, and giving them a whole bunch of balloons to use at their leisure and in any way, shape, or form they could. This included, I allowed my employees to take the balloons I gave them to do events for their friends and family for free. I had one of my employees do birthday parties where they decorated the room and the birthday party for their friends and family with the balloons I gave them. So not only did they get the practice, but they got to provide a free service to their friends and families using the balloons I provided out of my own cost. So it was good incentive to go practice. Even if I didn't pay them, they had a way they would be compensated for this. Plus, I figured making balloon animals, building balloon art is kind of fun, and it's enjoyable. And I hope that if you work for me, you would find it enjoyable too. And if you didn't, I probably wouldn't want you to work with me anyway. And with that, you got to do something that could be fun, that could help you earn more money in the future. And even though you didn't get paid for the hours, you would still get compensated for this time in some way. Then, of course, I had my standard overtime policy, over 8 hours a day, or 37.5 hours a week. For my American listeners, 37.5 hours a week sounds a little bit weird for overtime. Well, in Norway, you work a 40-hour work week, and in a 40-hour work week, they only count your actual work hours. They don't count a half an hour unpaid break per day that you get every day. So, yeah, in Norway, it's 37.5 hours. In the States, we would say 40 hours. Same difference. At any rate, I would pay them an extra 50%, time and a half per the job. Pretty standard overtime. Now, here's as an aside, I did not have to pay that overtime pay per law. I could make it set up so I didn't pay them overtime if they worked until they worked over 37.5 hours a week. Even if they worked like 10 hours in one day, I did not legally have to pay them overtime on a 10-hour day, as long as it was under the minimum requirement by law of 37.5 hours. I've worked jobs where I worked longer during the day, but it was under the minimum threshold of 37.5 hours for the week. Therefore, I did not get paid overtime. So I try to be, again, even with this policy, as generous as possible and say, hey, if it's over 8 hours a day or over 37.5 hours a week, you'll get overtime. Then I had holiday pay, which is Norwegian, they call it a red day, bank holidays, I would pay double time, or 100%, an extra 100% of their holiday pay. So if they're making, say they're working for me and I paid them 200 kroner an hour on a holiday, paid holiday, it would become 400 kroner an hour. And if they're working by themselves, they would get 20% of the job price instead of 10% or 5%. Then I had a standard vacation pay, which is mandated by law in Norway, of 10.2% of their total paycheck for the month. Now, in the States, if I do start up another company, which I'm thinking I might, I would probably still pay a 10.2% on vacation pay. And with that in mind, that is an idea on how, as an employer, even with a small business, you can actually set up a vacation pay for your employees. And for paid time off, you can actually set that as part of their pay and set that aside every month, every pay period. You pay that, say they pay $10 an hour for the week, just say they make $100 a week, and you would pay them out $110.20, but the $10.20 you would put into an account separate to save for the vacation time. And you'd set aside some money, again, similarly, you don't pay them the money. Say it was, $5 a day until you hit a max number amount. On both of these, you can just set this aside. Max number. Say you give them 5 paid days of sick pay. Well, you can build that into your compensation when you pay them, when you're doing your budgeting for your business. So, say you pay them $5 per shift towards their paid days off. But then once that $5 hits, say they average, say they're making, say a couple $100 a day. You max that out, say it's $200 a day, 5 days, that's $1,000. So once you pay that $1,000 aside, you just stop adding to that in your budget, and then you have that money set aside to pay them. So you're not getting knocked off balance. Oh no, my employee's sick, now I have to pay the money, and then I don't have the cash flow to pay them the money, but I have to pay them the money. No, you just build that in, so you're paying them out the sick days and the vacation day. You set that into a separate account, and you just keep adding to that account until you've maxed out those accounts, and then you're prepped as a business owner to be able to pay them when you need to. That's what I did with the vacation pay. I put aside the 10.2%, and then when it was time to pay out the vacation pay, I had a separate account. I just pulled it from that account and paid them. Straight up, really nice and easy. And then with the pay period, that's up to you. Again, you can do every 2 weeks. You can never do every month. I did a really weird pay period, and I had to explain to them why this was, which was pay will be paid once a month between the 1st and the 10th day of the month, but the payment will be paid on the second month following the month that the work was performed. For example, work performed in September will be paid no later than 10th of November. So that's a long time from the time they work to the time they get paid. And the reason being, I had a lot of corporate clients, and having a lot of corporate clients meant I had to wait 20 to 30 days to get paid from each of these clients myself. So this was setting up that I told them, if I get paid from a corporate client really quickly, then cool, I can pay you very quickly. But just to let you know, if I have a corporate client that we work, I bill, and then I have to wait 30 days to get paid. And the way my business model worked, I did not have a huge extra cash flow in between those times. And most often, I would not know I needed an employee. And if I had a need of an employee, it was only for that one day for like the entire month. And so I did not have the extra money often to pay him right off the bat. So I set the expectations, which is very important. I need to remind myself to do a episode on setting expectations with your clients and with your employees, which was, okay, if I get paid late, then you get paid late. If I get paid early, you get paid early. I'm going to pay you as quickly as possible. But that way, I left some room in my contract to have room to pay them if cash flow got tight. And part of this was cash flow would often get tight because balloon industry is actually very seasonal. You'd go a lot of balloons during the national holiday of Norway, May 17th, and then you'd have a lot of festivals in between in August and in the summer. And then it'd go speed up a lot in the fall, a lot more like Christmas and Halloween and these big events. And then Christmas would come just before Christmas, and like the whole country shuts down in Norway at Christmas time. So you'd have all your leading up to Christmas parties, and then after Christmas, nothing. Maybe a New Year's party, but then after that, between New Year's and May, it was like maybe one or two events. There's nothing. So that's what also messed with my cash flow, was this total seasonal job style of my job. So I always had positive cash flow. Well, not positive cash flow, but I always wound up at the end of the year being profitable, but most of that profit came near the end of the year. So with this in mind, again, if you're a small business, having an employee, understanding your situation, your cost, your cash flow issues, the seasonality of your job, if it's not seasonal, if you're doing really well, but keep an open communication with you and your employee. Hey, you're going to get paid on this time, and if it's an extra long delay, let them know. Well, my clients pay me here, and then I can pay you there. Make it very clear. Set the good expectations. Now, this was crazy. I think I had a total of like 5 or 6 different pay options and all that, which is kind of crazy. But I tried to take care of my employees as best as I could. Matter of fact, the first employee I had, I gave this contract to. He took it home to his dad, young man, who looked at it and then asked him, "Wait, is your boss going to make any money?" Of course I was making money. The employees have to make you money, otherwise you don't hire them. That's how that works. I have a whole episode on that. But that was the type of response I was looking for. I was trying to take such good care of the employee that outsiders would think, well, maybe this is so generous, can he maybe even making money off of this? And that's what I want. Now, of course, I was making money off my employee because that's what happens. You grow, you make money off your employee, but that money can go back into your business, can go back to your family, can go back into hire other employees. Of course, you make money on your employee. But the very fact that the employee felt so well compensated, that was my goal. Compensate my employee as best as I possibly could under the circumstances. Now, he did eventually leave me because he got married and got a full-time job and moved back to his hometown. And we're still on talking terms, and I still every so often I'll say hi, and he'll say hi to me, just ever so often. So that's the type of relationship you want with an employee. Now, my second employee, because, one thing I didn't talk about was the growth potential. I did tell all my employees that if I grew big enough to have a full-time employee, they could have the opportunity to become full-time employees. I gave them that option. And when I did wind up shutting down and I had my last employee, I had to lay him off a good year or so before I shut down, but we still keep in touch. He still calls me and we go out, we get a cup of coffee, we hang out. But he started his own business as well. Now he does 3D printing, but he decided he liked balloons so well, and with me shutting down, he has now added his own balloon department on his other company. So now he has is doing balloons as part of his company from what I trained him. And I don't remember if I said this earlier in this episode, but if you can give, as a matter of fact I did, if you can give your employee skills that help them last for life, that for me is the most amazing thing you can do for your people. That's an amazing compensation you can give to your employees that doesn't cost you anything outside of energy and care and concern and encouragement to give to the employee to help them grow in such a way they can take that and go forward. Now, to summarize, when you come up with a compensation plan, whatever you do is your call. When you're small, you can think about it and you can really shine in your compensation by being creative. And this means you can really take great care of your employees without needing to have a government mandate, without having to worry about providing a living wage as a baseline cash thing, but you can actually do things to grow and help your employees no matter what and compensate them well. Take good care of your employees. So as we wrap up here, I really would love to hear from you. I want to know what your plan is. How would you compensate your employees? What are some other creative ways that you can think of to compensate your employees other than just cash? Maybe a creative way to give your employees cash. Maybe there's something that I didn't think about. A special type of bonus or a spiff or something that you come up with. I would love to hear that. Please join us on Discord. I did make the Discord server free. You can email me, and if you like this episode and you have great ideas on compensation, you want to follow up with me, you want to be on this podcast, great. Please reach out to me. I want this to be a two-way conversation. I no longer want this to be just me rambling on, as I mentioned, like a supervillain, talking at you. I want to hear back from you. With that in mind, I've been your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, Isaiah O'Connor. See you next week. If today's episode added value to your day, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and consider giving us a stellar 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. Whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, or more. And remember, if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, I will personally read it out in the next episode. To support the show, you can make a one-time gift by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/bootstrap, donate through PayPal at paypal.me/IOCPOD, or make a contribution on our Patreon page at patreon.com/IOCPOD. Your support keeps the episodes coming. For even more content and exclusive perks, join our Patreon community at patreon.com/IOCPod. Patrons enjoy ad-free episodes, access to our private Discord server, early content previews, and a lot more. And here's an exciting offer. Get your free trial of our $5 a month Bootstrapper Community Explorer tier. This exclusive tier grants you ad-free content, Discord server access, and early content previews. Join us and be part of the inner circle. If you're feeling more generous, those who join tiers $25 a month and up will have a chance to be a featured guest on this podcast. A massive thank you to Wintergotten for generously providing the incredible intro and outro music at no cost. We appreciate their support. Be sure to check out Wintergotten's amazing work on YouTube at youtube.com/@Wintergotten. Until next time, I'm your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, Isaiah O'Connor, signing off. This is the O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast, brought to you by Athos Business Solutions. For our companion podcast, the Athos Business Podcast, hosted by Jason St. Clair, along with past episodes and related blogs, visit our website at athos.com. That's ATHEOZ.com or theoz.com. Goodbye for now.